Our Fair Beatles, a Wish story, celebrating 70 years of Wish TV.
On September 3rd, 1964, Beatle Mania made it to Indianapolis. John, Paul, George, and Ringo, the Fab Four, played 2 shows at the Indiana State Fairgrounds. It was a big memory for a generation, and Wish TV captured the only film of the concert and got a one-on-one interview with Paul McCartney. Tonight, for the first time in 60 years, we are re-airing our historic special, Our Fair Beatles, in its entirety.
To be able to shoot what we wanted to shoot was probably going to be difficult, but, you know, fools rush in, and so we decided, go ahead, we're going to do a show. We sold it. Now we had to do it.
Stick around, because we're going to share some exclusive behind the scenes of how we did it.
I'm sure it was part of, but Dad, it's the Beatles.
And we're going to hear from one of the screaming girls that was there. And now, may I present the Beatles.
That has happened to England since William Shakespeare. George Harrison, Paul McCartney, John Lennon, and Ringo Starr conquered the Indiana State Fair. For those who could find them, see them, or even touch them, the moments will be remembered. Moments that belong only to Our Fair Beatles. A report by WISH-TV News of more than a 36-hour game of hide-and-seek played by fans, cameramen, and reporters with these 4 young men. Together, they represent a phenomenon few understand, yet all agree that whatever they are, they're writing a new chapter in the history of show business. Our Fair Beatles is brought to you by your 5 Kinney Shoe Centers, headquarters for young adult shoe fashions.
When you need a shoulder to cry on, I hope it will be mine. Call me tonight.
The old axiom, there's no business like show business, is trite but true. In the early morning hours, the show began. Arriving at Weircook Municipal Airport, the Beatles got their first view of Indiana. The fans, few in number, were shocked that the moment had really arrived. There were the anticipated screams and squeals as the fans caught their first glimpse of the quartet. The security precautions, far more elaborate than when the late President Kennedy visited the same airport, included landing the plane at a little-used section of the field and surrounding it with 60 policemen. Born in Liverpool, England, a town referred to by some cynics as the Brooklyn of Britain, among people described as fun-minded and earthy, the Beatles have become used to the crowd. They know its power. They're dependent upon its applause. Tomorrow, there will be 26,000 at the Indiana State Fair waiting to see them perform. Tomorrow, the crowd would grow in size, becoming capable of any emotion. Now, however, things were proceeding according to a carefully plotted master plan, conceived months in advance. The dull monotony of constantly getting off and on airplanes in a strange country often confuses George, Paul, John, and Ringo. Sometimes it's difficult for them to determine exactly where they are. Once the cameras begin to grind and the many flashbulbs begin to pop, the Beatles are at home. These are the sounds they know and understand. The Beatles, famous for the Mersey sound, stopped in Indianapolis in the midst of a 33-day tour of 23 American cities. The entire tour is expected to gross $2 million. For the 2 shows at the Indiana State Fair, they were to receive $100,000. And then it was time to leave. The policemen, taking a deep breath of fresh air, prepared themselves for the hours and minutes yet to come. In the morning, the remarkably well-kept secret began to leak out. People whispered that the Beatles were housed at the Speedway Motel. The screaming, violent crowds of people were still not in evidence. A few faithful fans maintained a vigil outside the police lines in hopes of getting a glimpse of just one Beatle. The policemen, ready for any emergency, waited. Finally, the Beatles were on their way to perform at the Coliseum at the Indiana State Fairgrounds.
On behalf of all of the State Fair Board and all the good guys from WIFB, may I present the Beatles!
You think you've lost your love? Well, that's all I had. loves you, and you know you should be glad. She said you hurt her so, she almost lost her mind. Now she says you know, you're not the hurting kind. She said she loves you, and you know that can't be bad. She loves you, and you know you should be glad. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. You know it's up to you. I think it's only fair. Pride can hurt you too. Apologize to her because she loves you. You know that can't be bad. She loves you, and you know you should be glad. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
The Beatles, escaping the 13,000 fans who attended the first performance, were whisked to another building for a press conference before the second show. As the last screams faded away, even the critics remarked how well the teenagers behaved during the performance. It was true that many girls wept. It was true that many were hoarse from their incessant screaming. The casualties, however, were light. The potential danger of that many people all together at one time was great. The Beatles, fresh despite their exhausting ordeal, were still able to fascinate those who were willing to watch. Their accents were fab. Their dialogue was fantastic. Outside, along the midway of the State Fair, teenage boys were buying "I Hate the Beatles" buttons.
How did you get down there?
Well, all right.
Do you think the result of teenage parents had anything to do with
No, they've been revolting for years. Didn't you?
Not meaning it that way. They have, you know, they've been...
You get that off.
It's not suddenly that everyone started revolting against parents, is it, Ringo?
I don't think so.
I don't. And it's nothing to do with us if they have, anyway. That's what I say.
He's right.
It's nothing to do with revolting.
I don't.
Right. Everyone seems to think they are.
Pardon? Food. Well, Kellogg's are all right.
There's a problem.
I mean, cornflakes, sorry.
Yes, oh well.
Why is Ringo?
Here we go.
For the first time.
First time today. we go. Tree.
I can never understand him, you see. Can you?
He goes quack, quack,
No.
quack.
Do you like him?
All that.
From who?
Oh, I don't know.
Who's Charlie got?
About 5'11".
Comes from that door. We won't be drafted.
Draft? You mean the army?
Why weren't you in the army, any of you?
Yes. We all miss it.
It's finished.
If we didn't, we'd all hide in the south of Ireland. Wouldn't you?
Well, he's having a laugh, isn't he?
Thanks.
How closely was your script of the movie Hard Day's Night scripted, or how much of it did you fellas actually add in or wing?
Most of it was script. You can tell the script bits. They're all sort of semi-Irish, Welsh things. Most of it was script. A lot was ad-lib.
Having spent my childhood in Liverpool, England, I listened to the familiar accents and recalled memories of the rugged west coast of England, of the 8 miles of docks, and of the people who accept criticism with gales of laughter and respond by gaily thumbing their noses.
Tell me, how do the English audiences react compared with the American audiences?
It's about the same, you know. There's just more people here because they're bigger stadiums. We normally play in theatres in England.
You find English teenagers, in other words, the same as American teenagers?
Yeah, just with a different accent, like the one you used to have.
Yes, and I was in Liverpool too.
Yeah.
The way you're talking now is the way I used to talk. A lot of people never believe that. What other countries have you been to besides the United States?
A lot. Actually, passing through, you know, we've been to millions, but playing, we played Australia, New Zealand, Sweden, France, Holland, Norway. Quite a few places, you know.
And you sing in English and talk in English?
Yeah, well, you know, they don't mind anyway, because they've always bought American records or English records, and so they don't bother about the language barrier, you know.
It's a funny thing, of course, the rock and roll in itself is a whole new way of life, but for you, well, for example, we were both born somewhere around the same time, and we went different ways, but all of a sudden you become a millionaire. Doesn't this sometimes scare you just a little?
No, you're joking. It doesn't scare me at all. Probably scare me if nothing had happened, you know. If it had been a tramp or something, that might have scared me. No, you know, of course, you'd like it, wouldn't you? You know.
Oh, yeah.
It's good.
I hope one of these days I make it.
Yeah, I bet you will, too. Yeah.
On this end of the camera, though, I'm sure I won't. Being
Well, let's put it this way.
Thanks a lot.
Pleasure. As the Beatles prepared to vacate their 12 rooms and move to another city and another performance, there were still those willing to watch and look. Some were curious, some were bored, and many were infatuated. They'd come to see something, anything. The switchboard operators at the Speedway Motel were still busy with more than 40,000 telephone calls. Some remained faithful to the last. The final moments were to be savored until the very end. Perhaps now there are those remembering these events, those wondering whether Indiana will ever again see such a phenomenon. At least in the days and weeks to come, time will be marked by the visit of the 4 lads from Liverpool: George Harrison, Paul McCartney, John Lennon, and Ringo Starr. They came, they saw, they conquered. For some, they'll always be our fair Beatles.
If I trust in you, oh please, don't run and hide. If I love you too, oh please, don't hurt my pride like her, 'cause I couldn't stand the pain, and I would be sad if I knew love was in vain. So I hope you see that I would love to love you, and that she will cry when she learns we are two, 'cause I couldn't stand the pain, and I would be sad if I knew love was in vain.
brought to you by your 5 Kinney Shoe Centers, headquarters for young adult shoe fashion.
When she learns we are two, if I fell in love with you.
Forever changing the musical taste of Indianapolis. It's hard not to smile just looking at that video. Up next, behind the scenes of how we got the historical footage for our fair Beatles.
Now she says, you know, you're not the hurting kind. She loves you, and you know that can be bad.
For our 70th anniversary, we've been having a lot of fun finding never-before-seen footage in the archive, including this one. In 1984, Wish TV celebrated its 30th anniversary, and legendary anchor Mike Ahern sat down with David Smith, our program and production manager, for 20 of those years. One of the topics discussed, our fair Beatles, and how that historic special came to be.
We are now approaching, or right where we're at, as a matter of fact, when this goes on there, the 20th anniversary of when the Beatles appeared at the Coliseum for the State Fair. And you produced a show, and tell us about how that happened.
Well, of course, it was a big event, the Beatles coming to Indianapolis, you know, to the Indiana State Fair. And I think just about every station in town wanted to do some kind of a special on the Beatles. And we decided we were going to do one, and naturally it'd be easy to sell. But the problem was, how were you going to do it? We knew there was going to be great security, and to be able to shoot what we wanted to shoot was probably going to be difficult. But, you know, fools rush in, and so we decided, go ahead, we're going to do a show. We sold it. Now we had to do it. It wasn't too difficult interviewing them, because they did hold a news conference, and we did get our reporter right up there and able to talk with them. It was a little unique situation because our reporter was born in England, and as a matter of fact, was born in Liverpool, so he had some relationship there.
That was Bill Aylward.
Bill Aylward, yes. And Bill got an interview, so that was great. But now, how do you get their performance, you know? There were no cameras allowed in there, and strict security. Well, fortunately, at the time, we had an excellent chief photographer by the name of Jim Cardis. And Jim had a lot of guts, and he never took no for an answer. So he decided he was going to get those Beatles performing inside the Coliseum somehow. I don't know to this day exactly how he got in with his camera, but he got in the Coliseum with his camera, got down on his stomach and crawled underneath the seats to the front of the seats, as close as he could get to the stage, and lying on his stomach by the front seats, shot up at the stage and got film, exclusive film of the Beatles performing. I'm sure there was no other film taken, you know, like that at the time. So that made the show a little bit unique. And I think it was a nice show.
That's a rare piece of film you have there.
Yes, it's extremely well. It's one of a kind, you know. I think that there are an awful lot of Beatle fans around the country who would give a lot of money for that.
What did you call the show?
Well, I like to think up titles, you know, and I'm program manager. And so I said, let's call it Our Fair Beatles. They're going to be at the State Fair, so what? So that's what we did. And, you know, we might get shots of the cars driving by, you know, with the police in front and back. We had no idea. So, yeah, it was kind of worrisome. But I think Jim Cardis knew, too, that we were on the spot, and he was determined to get the film for us, and he came through, thank heavens.
Did you have a favorite Beatle?
I knew you'd ask me that. Of course, Paul. Paul, he was the cutest.
Fans so loud you could barely hear the music. Up next, we hear from one of those girls attending the concert. Spoiler alert, she has finally gotten her voice back after all that screaming. 13,000 people attended each of the two Beatles concerts 60 years ago. Most of the crowd were young people, notably screaming teenage girls. These concerts changed the way Indy looked at live music. Sheila Schweitzer was there, a screaming 12-year-old under the watchful eye of her best friend's mother. Have a listen as she takes us down memory lane.
May I present the Beatles!
I believe I was 12 years old in 1964, and I remember September 3rd, it was right around Labor Day and the beginning of the school year. I went with my friend Kathy Riley and her mother. We were both just so starry-eyed and delighted and couldn't believe that we were going. There were tons of people, mostly female in the crowd, and everyone was screaming as soon as the Beatles came on stage. It was nonstop standing and screaming. I don't think the audio was the best in that field house, but you could hardly hear the Beatles. I remember them when they sang, "I Want to Hold Your Hand." They were shaking their heads, and that was the big signature for the girls to scream even louder, so you could hardly hear. I kind of remember "She Loves You," yeah, and every time it was yeah, yeah, yeah. The screams became louder and louder. I guess I need to scream, maybe, you know, that's what you do. So could I hear anything? No. Afterwards, everybody was running around looking to see if they could find where the Beatles were going next. And there was a boxcar truck that I was probably carrying some supplies, and everyone was touching the truck and screaming that they saw Paul. Would he really be in the box truck with no windows? So I don't know. It was quite an eventful, exciting day. Everybody was so happy, pumped up, but it was just loud and crazy. To go to a concert with the Beatles was a pretty big deal.
Sheila Schweitzer says her father just couldn't understand the appeal of these long-haired rock and roll singers. For her, it was the start of a lifetime of concerts, from Simon and Garfunkel to the Grateful Dead. She even took her own daughter to see the Backstreet Boys. Special thanks to all of the Wish TV staff, past and present, and to you for joining us tonight as we continue our 70th anniversary celebrating our commitment to local programming, then, now, and always.
She loves you, and you know you should be glad. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. With a love like that, you know you should be glad. With a love like that, you know you should be glad.